You wake up before dawn in a village carved into the cliffs above the Valley of the Kings. Your hands still ache from yesterday. Somewhere in your toolkit, one chisel is missing. And in this village, every single tool you touch has already been counted, weighed, and written down by a scribe who forgets nothing. This is not paranoia. This is Deir el-Medina, the walled community where the artisans who carved and painted the tombs of the pharaohs actually lived, from around 1550 to 1070 BCE. The village sits in a narrow desert hollow, deliberately hidden from the fertile riverbank, sealed off by its own high stone wall and a single guarded gate. Outside your door, the cliffs are already catching the first orange light, and somewhere below, the Nile is still dark and quiet. For 400 years, life inside these walls was documented in obsessive detail. Wages, sick days, arguments with neighbors, even the exact excuse you gave for missing a shift. Stung by a scorpion and brewing beer for a festival are real recorded excuses scratched onto broken pottery that still survives in museum collections today. So if a chisel goes missing on your watch, that is not a small problem. It could become the first thread in an accusation that ends your life. But which law would actually kill you first? Almost everyone guesses tomb robbery. It is an easy guess. Just over the ridge from this village lies the Valley of the Kings itself, where pharaoh after pharaoh was sealed away with everything he was believed to need for eternity. Gold jewelry, painted furniture, sealed jars of wine and oil. That buried fortune, sitting untouched in the dark, was a constant temptation for people who often had almost nothing. They are still wrong, though. Tomb robbery really was punished by death. Under the pharaoh Ramses IX, around 1110 BCE, a wave of break-ins hit the royal cemetery, and the trials that followed were recorded on two scrolls historians now call Papyrus Abbot and Papyrus Amherst. Convicted robbers were impaled on wooden stakes, in public, outside the very tombs they had broken into, as a warning to everyone who walked past. That is a horrifying way to die. But it was not the fastest way to end up condemned, because Egyptian law was not really built around what you did. It was built around a single idea called Maat. Maat was the ancient Egyptian concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order, the invisible principle believed to hold the sky, the Nile flood, and human behavior together in one working system. Every judge answered to Maat. Every scribe answered to Maat. Even the pharaoh himself was only allowed to rule because he was said to uphold it. And Maat did not stop mattering when you died. Egyptians believed that in the afterlife, your heart was placed on a scale and weighed against a single feather, representing Maat itself. Tip the scale with guilt, and a creature called Amet, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, was said to devour your heart on the spot and erase you from existence forever. Before the scale, you were expected to recite 42 separate declarations of innocence, one for each divine judge believed to be watching. So breaking Maat was never just a crime. It followed you past your own death. So what actually broke Maat the fastest? In this life or the next? Doing nothing. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing centuries after the pharaohs, recorded something about Egyptian law that still unsettles legal historians today. If you witnessed a crime and failed to step in, and failed to report it, you could be punished as though you had committed that crime yourself. Read that again. Not committing a crime could carry the same weight as committing one. And this was not just a claim written by an outsider looking in. The Turin Judicial Papyrus, the actual trial record of a conspiracy to assassinate Ramesses III, describes something that confirms it. Some of the people condemned to die alongside the plotters had not planned anything and had not lifted a weapon. Their crime was simpler than that. They had heard whispers of the plot, and they had said nothing. That single detail, buried inside a 3,000-year-old court record, is exactly what the Greek historian had described from the outside. Standing at the edge of your own doorway, watching trouble unfold 3 houses down, and simply going back to bed was not a neutral choice in this world. It was complicity. So let's recreate one of your days. It is evening in Deir el-Medina. The heat has finally broken, and the cliffs above the village are turning orange with the last of the sunlight. Smoke drifts up from cooking fires along the narrow street. A donkey brays somewhere near the well, and somewhere else, someone is laughing. You are walking home along the narrow stone path between the houses when you hear shouting from a neighbor's courtyard. A fight over a debt, maybe, or missing grain. You do not know these people well. It is none of your business, you tell yourself. You keep walking, eyes forward, pretending you heard nothing at all. Your heart is already pounding, because some part of you knows this moment will be remembered by someone. A neighbor might mention seeing you on this path tomorrow. A scribe might ask you directly, days from now, what exactly you saw. But under Maat, none of your business barely exists. Silence has a price. If that argument turns into a real crime, and a scribe later learns you were on that path and said nothing, you stop being a witness in the eyes of the law. You become a suspect. And it was not only violence that worked this way. Every year, when the Nile flooded and pulled back, leaving behind the black silt that fed your crops, a scribe walked your field with a measuring rope and calculated exactly how much grain you owed the state. This system survives today in a document called the Wilbur Papyrus, a massive land survey from the reign of Ramses V, translated in the 20th century by the Egyptologist Alan Gardner. Officials tracked the flood's exact height using a stone structure called a nilometer, a set of marked steps built right into the riverbank, because in this land, geography and taxation were the same instrument. If your harvest came in smaller than the scribe's number, you still owed the full amount, flood or no flood. Lie about your yield, hide grain in a second granary, bribe the assessor to look the other way, and you were not committing some small private crime. Getting caught meant more than a fine. It could mean losing the grain your family needed to survive until the next flood. You were lying to the exact system that kept Maat in balance for everyone downstream of you. And that made you dangerous to your whole community, not just to yourself. Here's the part almost nobody expects, though. This same village, watch this closely, once stood up to the pharaoh directly and survived to tell about it. Around 1157 BCE, under Ramesses III, the grain rations owed to Deir el-Medina arrived late, not once, but again and again. The workers put down their tools and walked off the job. They marched past the guard posts and sat down at the outer walls of nearby mortuary temples, refusing to move until someone in power finally listened. Historians now call the record of what happened the Turin Strike Papyrus, and most consider it the earliest documented labor strike in human history. The Egyptologist Yaroslav Cherny spent decades studying the thousands of broken pottery shards and limestone flakes this village left behind, and it was his research that revealed just how legally literate these ordinary laborers actually were. They knew exactly which official to complain to. They knew exactly how to phrase a formal grievance so it could not be quietly ignored. And eventually, they won. So the deadliest law in ancient Egypt was never really about tombs or grain or even the pharaoh at all. It was about whether you spoke up and when. Silence could kill you, but knowing your rights and using your voice at exactly the right moment could also save you. Which brings this story back to your own century. Most modern legal systems do not actually require you to step in when you witness a crime. In the United States and the United Kingdom, walking away from a stranger's emergency is, in most circumstances, perfectly legal. France and Germany disagree and still hold citizens legally responsible for failing to help someone in danger, a principle with roots far older than most people realize. Modern psychologists John Darley and Bib Latane spent years studying a related pattern, one they called the bystander effect. The more people who witness someone in trouble, the less likely any single one of them is to actually step in. Everyone quietly assumes someone else will act, whether that is on a crowded subway platform or in a busy parking lot. In Deir el-Medina, that assumption could get you executed. Every time you scroll past a video of a stranger in trouble, instead of calling for help, you are making the same choice a farmer near the Valley of the Kings made 3,000 years ago. Maat just is not watching you anymore. Or is it? 3,000 years of legal history says otherwise. Someone was always keeping score, even when it did not feel that way. Tomorrow morning, you will wake up again in that same village, carved into the same cliffs. Your hands will still ache, but check your toolkit one more time. The missing chisel was never really the danger. The danger was always the empty space beside it, the space where your voice was supposed to go, the moment you had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. In Deir el-Medina, that space could get you killed. 3,000 years later, it still might.